My name is Geraldine Whitmore. I'm 52 years old, and I have been married for 28 years. Last spring, I drove downtown to surprise my husband at his office. He's the CEO. I had cruise tickets in my purse and his repaired wedding watch in a small box. At the entrance, a sign read, "Authorized personnel only." I told the young guard I was the CEO's wife. He laughed. Not cruelly. The way you laugh at a harmless mix-up. "Ma'am, I see his wife every day. There she is, coming out right now." A woman in a camel coat walked out of my husband's building. In her ears were the diamond earrings my husband gave me for our 25th anniversary. The ones I thought I had lost. I had built my family around that man. Every ledger, every lean year, every promise. So I smiled, and I played along. "Oh, my mistake," I said. And that small lie became the most useful thing I ever said. What I found over the next 6 weeks, my husband never saw coming. Neither did she. And neither did the 7 people sitting at his boardroom table. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women tell the stories nobody expected them to survive. If you believe 28 years of loyalty deserves better than a stranger wearing your earrings, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. To explain what I did next, I have to take you back to a garage in 2001. My father died that winter. He left me the money from selling our farm in Licking County, $80,000. Every acre of his life turned into a check. Lawrence and I had been married 3 years. He had a plan for a freight company and a voice that could sell rain to a flood. I had the money and a head for numbers. We signed the papers together at a card table. Whitmore Logistics was born between a lawnmower and a chest freezer. For 9 years, I kept the books. No salary. No title on the door. I invoiced clients at midnight with a baby monitor next to the calculator. When the first truck broke down, I found the money to fix it. When payroll came up short, I skipped the dentist. I kept the books before this company could afford a bookkeeper, and I kept them clean. In 2010, my mother got sick, and somebody had to become her hands and her memory. So I stepped back. Lawrence insisted I keep my 20% of the company. "For the family," he said, and I believed the words meant what they said. Mom passed in 2017. The company grew. The trucks multiplied. And somewhere along those 25 years, my name quietly fell off the story he told at dinners. He became the self-made man. I became the wife who held down the fort. I didn't fight it. Fort holding is honest work. But I want you to remember 2 things as this story goes on. I never sold my 20%, and a bookkeeper never throws away paper. The last 2 years, Lawrence had gone distant in a way I couldn't name. Late meetings, a new headquarters downtown, a phone that slept face down. When I asked, he had answers so smooth they came pre-ironed. "The board runs me ragged, Gary. New building, new pressure." Our 28th anniversary was coming, and I decided to fight the distance the only way I knew, by showing up. I booked the Alaska cruise we had postponed for 10 years. 2 tickets, a little balcony, glaciers in June. I also picked up his wedding watch from the repair shop. He'd stopped wearing it when it started losing time, and I'd had the movement rebuilt. It seemed romantic then. It seems like evidence now. Our daughter Emily, 26, an ICU nurse, more spine than the 2 of us combined, was the one who pushed me. "Surprise him for once, Mom. Walk in there with the tickets." There was only one wrinkle. Lawrence had a rule about the office. Never drop by unannounced. New security policy. The board hates family wandering the building. I had accepted that rule for 3 years the way you accept weather. Looking back, it was never a policy. It was a perimeter. But that morning, I didn't know it yet. I put on my good coat, set the tickets and the watch box on the passenger seat, and drove the 25 minutes into downtown Columbus with my heart light for the first time in months. I remember humming at the red lights. I remember thinking 28 years deserved a little ceremony. That was the last hour of my old life, and I spent it happy. The new headquarters was 12 stories of glass with the family name across the top in steel letters. My name, too, technically. I had never been inside. At the desk by the turnstiles, a sign faced the street. "Authorized personnel only." The guard was young, maybe 25, with a kind face and a laminated badge that said Danny. I gave him my best surprise party smile. "I'm here to see Lawrence Whitmore, I'm his wife." Danny didn't check a list. He didn't pick up a phone. He laughed, easy and friendly, like I'd told a small joke. "Ma'am, I see his wife every day. There she is, coming out right now." And through the glass doors came a woman in a camel coat. Younger than me by a good margin. Heels that had never seen a gravel driveway. She passed close enough that I caught her perfume, close enough to see the diamond earrings catching the lobby light. My earrings. The 25th anniversary earrings that had vanished from my jewelry box months ago, the ones Lawrence helped me search the house for, on his knees by the dresser. The very picture of a helpful husband. A valet pulled a car around. She took the keys without looking at the man who handed them over. Some part of me, the part that had been keeping accounts for 30 years, went very quiet and very cold, and started writing things down. The rest of me smiled at Danny. "Oh. My mistake," I said. "Wrong building." He nodded, kind as ever, already turning away. I walked back to my car at the pace of a woman with nowhere important to be. 28 years teaches you one thing above all: never let them see your hands shake. I sat behind the wheel, looked at the watch box on the passenger seat, and did not start the engine for a long time. I didn't drive home. I parked across the street at a coffee shop with a window view and ordered tea I never touched. Around 1 o'clock the camel coat came back carrying shopping bags, and I watched the lobby receive her. The guard nodded. A man in a suit held the elevator. A young woman with a lanyard waved, the small eager wave you give someone who outranks you. Nobody checked her badge. She rode up toward the executive floor like the building belonged to her, and the building seemed to agree. I needed to know how deep this went, so I did something simple. I called the main line, the number printed on the company website, and asked for Mr. Whitmore's office. A receptionist answered, warm and practiced. I said I was calling about a charity dinner and needed to confirm Mr. Whitmore's schedule. She didn't hesitate. "His wife usually handles his personal calendar, ma'am. May I take a message for her?" His wife handles his calendar. Usually. I thanked her in a voice I didn't recognize, and hung up. Understand what that meant. This was no hotel room secret, no lipstick on a collar. This was a system with a receptionist trained into it. A stranger was living my life in broad daylight 5 days a week, with valet service. She answered to my title. She wore my earrings to work. And every person in that glass building had a part in the play. The guard, the valet, the receptionist. All reading lines from a script I had never been shown. I sat with that until my tea went cold. Then I drove home, because the one advantage I had left was that nobody in the play knew the audience had arrived. Lawrence came home at 8 to the smell of pot roast. He kissed my forehead the way he had for 28 years, hung his jacket on the same hook, and told me about his day. "Meetings stacked on meetings," he said. "A vendor dispute. A board member with opinions about fuel contracts." He was relaxed, detailed, boring on purpose. He lied the way other men breathe. No flutter, no glance away, just a smooth column of it, like a man reading a quarterly report he'd written himself. I refilled his glass and watched my own hand. Steady. Good. "Anything interesting at the office?" I asked. "Same circus, different clowns?" he said, and smiled at me with real warmth, which was somehow the worst part. I had planned, in some soft corner of myself, to simply ask him, "Who is she?" Instead, I heard myself ask about our joint savings, casual as a grocery list, just wondering where we stood, with the anniversary trip coming. Something crossed his face, there and gone, fast as a headlight through a window. "It's all handled, Gary. You wouldn't understand the business." He said it gently. That was the poison of it. He said it the way you'd speak to a child at a funeral. I nodded and cleared the plates. Here is what I decided at that sink, with my hands in warm water and my husband humming in the den. You don't confront a man who has been lying for years. Confrontation is a gift to a liar. It shows him where the cameras are. No, you don't confront him. You audit him. And I had been waiting 16 years for a reason to open my ledgers again. I want to be fair to myself, because for one bad night I wasn't. I sat up asking how I could have missed it. Then I pulled my old household files and remembered. I hadn't missed it. 18 months earlier I had caught the scent. $4,000 to $6,000 a month, moving out of our joint investment account into something labeled only with a transfer code. I asked Lawrence about it directly, at this same table. He didn't flinch. A week later, he handed me a letter on company letterhead, signed by the corporate accountant, explaining a capital reserve, a tax strategy, entirely routine. It looked official because it was official. The accountant worked for him. I pushed anyway. I asked to go to the bank together and move the bulk into an account that required both signatures for any withdrawal. He agreed, enthusiastically. Then came a conference, then quarter end, then a cancelled appointment, then another. The account that needed us both was never quite opened, and the transfers quietly shifted somewhere I had no window into at all. I had asked the right questions, he had rehearsed the right answers, and he controlled every door I knocked on. So spare me the word naive. I was outmaneuvered, and there is a difference. That night I went through my paper box. The one Lawrence teased me about. 30 years of statements and stubs because a bookkeeper never throws away paper. Near the bottom I found an envelope that had come to our house a year ago, addressed to L. Whitmore, the HOA of Brickstone Row. Junk mail, Lawrence had said, plucking it off the counter. I had kept it anyway. Old habit. Best habit I ever had. The next morning, after Lawrence left, I spread our finances across the dining table like a crime scene, which is what they were. It took me 2 days of cross-checking to find the artery. Years back, Lawrence had opened a small secondary checking account for convenience. Household repairs, his golf dues, nothing that ever seemed worth watching. My name was on it too. That's the detail he forgot, or never thought would matter. I ordered 18 months of statements, and there it was. Patient as a heartbeat, an automatic payment, $612 a month, to Brickstone Row Homeowners Association. The same name as the envelope in my paper box. My husband was paying homeowner dues on a home I had never entered. Brickstone Row turned out to be in German Village. Brick streets, iron fences, the kind of restored townhouses that cost more than our first decade of marriage. 15 minutes from his office. I drove there on a Tuesday afternoon and rolled slowly past number 14, window boxes, a brass knocker. And in the upstairs window, watering a fern like she'd been born to it, stood the woman in the camel coat. She had my earrings. She had my title. Apparently, she also had a mortgage with my husband. I didn't stop the car. I turned at the corner, drove home, and sat in the driveway making a list on the back of a grocery receipt, because that is what calm looks like when it's holding a knife. Whose name was on that house? Where was the money really coming from? And how long had junk mail been arriving at my address? The next morning, I did what bookkeepers do best. I went looking for the paper. Here is something they don't tell betrayed wives often enough. You don't need a private investigator. You need a county website and a library card. Property in America is public record. Deeds, transfers, taxes, all of it sitting in the open for anyone patient enough to look. I made coffee, put on my reading glasses, and went to the Franklin County Auditor's site. I typed the address, 14 Brickstone Row. The parcel came up in seconds, complete with a photo of that brass knocker. Purchase date, spring of 2023, 3 years ago. The same year Lawrence moved the company into its shiny new headquarters and told me the board hated family in the building. Sale price, $640,000. I wrote it down with a steady hand and moved to the owner line. The owner was not Lawrence Whitmore. The owner was not the woman in the camel coat. The owner was a company. A limited liability company. The kind people use when they want a name that isn't a name. That slowed me for exactly 1 cup of coffee. Because an LLC has to register with the Ohio Secretary of State, and that registry is public too. Anyone can search it for free. I found the business search page, typed the company name from the deed, and paid a few dollars for copies of the filing documents. The screen thought about it. I sat in my quiet kitchen, 28 years of family photos on the wall behind me, my mother's clock ticking on the mantel, and waited for a state database to tell me the truth about my marriage. The filing loaded. Formed in 2023. Statutory agent, a downtown law firm. And then, the company name. Printed in plain government type. No drama, no music. I read it 3 times. Then I read the 2 member names underneath, and the kitchen went very still. Sterling Whitmore Holdings, LLC, 2 members listed, L. Whitmore, F. Sterling. He had blended his name with hers and filed it with the state of Ohio, the way we had once signed our marriage license. A merger. I searched the name F. Sterling, and the internet handed her to me in under a minute, because she was proud of herself. Frances Sterling. Vice President of Client Relations, Whitmore Logistics. Her profile photo was professional, warm, camel coat elegant. The same face I'd watched water a fern. Joined the company in 2020. Skilled in relationship management, which I suppose was one way to put it. 38 years old according to an alumni page. 14 years younger than me. 17 years younger than him. I sat with the numbers because numbers are where I live. The LLC was formed in 2023. I checked the date twice. It was filed 1 week after my 49th birthday. That week, Lawrence had been at a logistics conference in Chicago. He had called me from a noisy hallway to say happy birthday. Sorry about the timing, we'd celebrate when he got home. He'd sounded rushed. Now I knew why. Between panels, he'd been buying a house with his vice president. He never once, in 28 years, remembered my shoe size. But he remembered to file paperwork. That's the thing about Lawrence I need you to understand. The carelessness was never real. He forgot only what didn't matter to him. The filings, the deeds, the transfer codes. Those were all immaculate. So the question was no longer whether my husband had a secret life. The question was, what it ran on. Houses like that need money. Money leaves footprints. And I had spent 9 years learning every path money could take out of Whitmore Logistics, because I was the one who'd built the paths. You reach a point in a thing like this where you have to choose your weapon. Some women choose a locksmith. Some choose a lawyer's letter. Some a scene in a restaurant. I chose a woman named Marlene Voss. Marlene and I had come up together in the 90s, 2 young bookkeepers sharing a fax machine at a Columbus accounting office. She'd gone on to become a forensic accountant. The kind companies hire when the numbers smell wrong and courts listen to when she says why. 58 now. Reading glasses on a chain, a handshake like a door closing. I hired her with my own money from the small retirement account I'd kept in my own name out of nothing but farm girl stubbornness. Best money I ever spent. Marlene heard the whole story without a single gasp, took notes, and then set the rules of engagement, tapping the table once for each. We only use what you have a legal right to hold, accounts with your name on them, mail delivered to your house, public records. Nothing sneaky, Gary. No guessing his passwords, no recording his calls. The minute you steal evidence, you become the story. Then she smiled for the first time. Paper doesn't cry and paper doesn't lie. Bring me paper. I brought her a banker's box of it. Statements, the HOA envelope, the deed, the LLC filing, my old ledgers for comparison. She went through it like a surgeon, and near the end she looked up at me over the glasses, and her voice changed. Gary, if any of this traces back to company money, client funds, expense accounts, this stops being a marriage problem. She let that sit. It becomes a board problem. I drove home with those words riding in the passenger seat, where the cruise tickets used to be. 2 weeks later, the Hospital Foundation held its spring charity gala, and the trade newsletter listed Whitmore Logistics as a platinum sponsor. Lawrence told me it was a vendor thing, deadly boring, you'd hate it. I agreed sweetly that I would. Then I bought a single ticket with my own card and sat at a table in the back, in a black dress and a haircut he wouldn't have noticed anyway. They arrived together. Lawrence in the tuxedo I'd taken in at the waist myself, Frances Sterling on his arm in champagne silk, my earrings throwing light from across the ballroom. The MC introduced the sponsors and stumbled kindly over her. Mr. Whitmore and his companion this evening. Half the room didn't bother with the asterisk. I heard Mrs. Whitmore float from the bar. I heard a hospital administrator thank Mrs. Whitmore for the company's generosity. Frances corrected no one. She had a smile for every mistake, and it was not the smile of a woman hearing something wrong. Late in the evening she stood near my table, close enough that her perfume arrived first, talking to a young woman in fundraising. The young woman said something admiring about Lawrence. Frances laughed into her glass. "Some women build the man," she said. "Some women get to enjoy him." The table of strangers laughed along. I studied the auction display so my face would have something to do. And that's where I saw it. A weekend in Napa. Wine tour for two. The donation card printed neat as a hymnal. Courtesy of the Whitmore Logistics Client Fund. The Client Fund. I had created that budget line in 2004 to buy truckers' coffee and shippers' steak dinners. Now it was buying auction prizes and, I was beginning to suspect, a great deal more. I left before dessert. Nobody noticed the audience slipping out. The play went on without me. On my money. If you've ever sat in the back of a room and watched someone else take applause for a life you built, I need you to hear what comes next very carefully. Because what I found inside my husband's safe changed everything. If you're still with me, take 1 second and hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments, paper or tears? I chose paper. The following Monday, Lawrence packed his good luggage. "Logistics conference in Scottsdale," he said. 5 days. Brutal schedule. He even showed me the conference website, because a good lie always brings a brochure. I kissed him goodbye and waved from the porch like a wife in an insurance commercial. Then I went inside and looked at the confirmation that had come through on our joint card. He'd gotten careless with which card, or maybe after 3 years he'd simply stopped believing I could catch him. I called the resort's front desk, gave the confirmation number, and said, in my warmest voice, that I was calling to check on my reservation. The young man on the line was delighted to help. "Yes, ma'am, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, arriving Monday, 1 King Suite, 5 nights. Then, brightly, proud of his upsell. "And I see you have the anniversary package, champagne and roses at Turndown. Would you like to add the couple's massage?" The anniversary package. I looked at the calendar on my kitchen wall, and at the wall beside it, where Emily had drawn a little heart in June the year she was 7, still faintly there after nearly 20 years, because I never had the heart to paint over it. Our 28th anniversary was 11 days away. My husband was celebrating an anniversary this week, in the desert, with champagne at Turndown. It just wasn't ours. "No thank you," I said. "Everything sounds perfect." And it was, in its way. Because his 5 days in Scottsdale were about to become my 5 days at home, alone, with his study, his files, and the safe he thought I'd forgotten how to open. He should have remembered. I'm the one who bought it. The safe stands in the corner of the study, bolted to the slab, bought by me in 2009 from a man named Gus, who threw in delivery. It holds our wills, the house deed, my mother's ring. Ours, in every legal sense of the word. The spare key lives in a watchbox on the closet shelf, where I put it 15 years ago. On the second night of Scottsdale, I opened it. Behind our folders sat a leather portfolio I had never seen, soft and expensive, zipped shut. I laid it on the desk and went through it page by page, the way Marlene taught me. Touch nothing out of order, photograph everything, put it all back the way it was. First, the closing file for 14 Brickstone Row. Purchased by Sterling Whitmore Holdings, 2023. Down payment, $180,000. And stapled behind it, the wire record, drawn from the Capital Reserve account. The tax strategy, the one with the accountant's letter. 18 months of my questions, answered in one staple. Second, an invoice from a wedding venue called the Ivy House. Deposit received, $12,500. Event, Sterling, Whitmore wedding. Date, June 2027. She had a venue, she had a date. He was still wearing his ring to my dinner table. Third, and this is the one I want you to hold on to. A divorce petition. Drafted. Complete. My name typed neat in the caption. Whitmore v. Whitmore. The date line was blank, waiting. Behind it, a proposed division of assets that a lawyer had clearly massaged for months, in which nearly everything worth having had become separate business property, and I kept the furniture. He had already divorced me on paper. He just hadn't told me yet. At the very bottom of the portfolio, under all of it, one more thing, a photograph from 2001. Lawrence and me in front of the garage, his hands black with engine grease, my hair in a farm girl braid, both of us laughing at something off camera. He had kept it under the wreckage of us like a bookmark. I photographed every page with my phone. I zipped the portfolio, set it back at its angle, and locked the safe. Then I sat down in his chair to decide what kind of woman I was going to be about this. I cried once during all of this. That night, alone, at the kitchen table, with the printed copy of that 2001 photograph in front of me. I'm telling you because it's true, and because it was short. I cried for the man with grease on his hands who used to count dollar bills into a coffee can with me and call it our empire. That man would have been ashamed of this one. Or maybe, and this is the thought that dried me out, that man was always this one, just poorer. Grief is allowed. You can grieve a man and still audit him. So when the crying finished, I set the photograph beside my phone and pulled up the picture of the Ivy House invoice, and I let the two of them sit there together, 2001 and June 2027, the beginning and the plan for after me. Then I went to work. I made a list of every account with my name on it and ordered fresh statements for all of them. In the card history, I found one more small, perfect thing, a jeweler's charge from 3 months back for cleaning and resetting a pair of diamond earrings. My earrings. He hadn't even bought her new ones. He'd taken mine from my jewelry box, had them polished, and handed them over. The man who helped me search for them on his knees. That detail did something the divorce petition hadn't. It made everything simple. In the morning, I called Marlene and told her about the wire records stapled to the closing file. She was quiet for a moment. "Company account?" she asked. "That's what we're going to find out," I said. And I opened a safe deposit box at my own bank that afternoon. In my own name. First key I'd owned alone since 1998. Marlene worked for 2 weeks, and she worked only with what we could lawfully hold. My joint statements, the public filings, the closing file photos, the HOA records, plus the trade journal data anyone could read. Then she sat me down in her office with a single folder and talked to me like a client, which I appreciated, because pity would have knocked me over. "Here's the shape of it, Gary. The monthly transfers you caught 18 months ago, 4,000 to 6,000. Flow toward the same neighborhood as that HOA payment and the townhouse's carrying costs. The capital reserve that funded the down payment shows every sign of being routed through the company before it ever touched a personal account. The Scottsdale trip was booked under a client entertainment code. Your client fund, the one you invented. So were at least 2 other resort stays and that jeweler's invoice." She took off her glasses. "If the company's internal records match what these statements imply, and I'd bet my license they do, you're looking at somewhere near $400,000 over 3 years, blended from marital money and corporate money. The marital part is called dissipation of assets, and a divorce court will make him account for it. The corporate part," she tapped the folder, "is expense fraud. And there's more. She reports to him. Directly. Every public company and most private ones his size have a conduct policy about undisclosed relationships with a direct subordinate. I'd be amazed if his company doesn't. I'd be more amazed if he hasn't signed it annually." I thought of Lawrence at the dinner table telling me I wouldn't understand the business. I understood it fine. I understood it in dollars, dates, and budget codes. Marlene walked me to the door and said the sentence I have quoted to myself ever since. "There are 2 kinds of judgment day, Gary. Divorce court is the small one." Lawrence came home from Scottsdale tanned and tender. Flowers on Tuesday. My favorite bakery on Thursday. A husband being sweet on a schedule is a husband about to ask for a signature, and sure enough, Sunday night he spread papers across the kitchen table like a picnic. "Estate planning," he said. "We're not getting younger, Gary. This moves your 20% of the company into a family trust. Cleaner for taxes, safer for Emily. He slid a pen across the wood. The trustee, in every document, was Lawrence. Control of my shares, Lawrence. And tucked in the stack, a refinance application for the house. Our house, the one asset the drafted divorce petition had left cleanly mine. I finally saw the whole machine. Gather her assets, then file the petition in the safe. A man who empties your pockets before he pushes you out the door, so there's less to divide when you land. I did not blink, and I did not sign. I used his own commandment on him. You always say never sign what your lawyer hasn't read. Let me have someone look it over. It's a lot of pages. The mask slipped, only for a second. A flash of something impatient and cold, the face Francis probably thought was reserved for other people. Then the smile again. Of course. But the tax window closes end of the month, Gary. It has to be done by then. It's technical. You wouldn't understand the business. Twice, in 1 month. He should have embroidered it on a pillow. End of the month, I repeated, like a good student. He kissed my head, satisfied, and went up to bed, and I sat looking at the pen he'd left on the table. He had given me a deadline, so I gave myself one too. Whatever was going to happen would happen before the end of the month. Just not the thing on his calendar. Monday morning, I hired Dana Pruitt, a divorce attorney with a corner office and a reputation for winning quietly. I paid the retainer from my own account. Dana read Marlene's folder in silence, then looked up with the expression of a woman who has just been handed a finished puzzle. First rule, you sign nothing, not the trust, not the refinance, not a birthday card if he printed it. Second, Ohio divides property equitably, and when one spouse spends marital money on an affair, that's dissipation. Courts make it come out of his share. Your accountant friend has essentially gift-wrapped that argument. She flipped to the photographed divorce petition and actually laughed, once, without a humor. He had this drafted while planning your anniversary trip? The trip wasn't for me, I said. Even better, said Dana. Third rule, quiet. We finish building before he knows there's a building. No hints, no cold shoulders, no righteous looks over dinner. Can you do that? I told her I'd been doing it for 6 weeks. That afternoon, at a bank branch out by the mall, I opened my first solo checking account since 1998. The teller was Emily's age, sweet, careful. Just you on this one, ma'am? She asked. Just me, I said. First time since 1998. She didn't understand why I smiled at the signature line, and that was fine. Before I left her office, Dana had tapped one page of Lawrence's drafted settlement, the valuation of Whitmore Logistics. This number is low, she said. Suspiciously low. If he's lowballing the company's value to shrink your half, that's not just a divorce trick. She looked at me over the page. That's a number his board would want to see too. I was starting to notice how often all roads led to that boardroom. That night, I went to the file cabinet in the guest room, my file cabinet, the one piece of office furniture that came home with me in 2010, and pulled the founding records of Whitmore Logistics. My hands knew right where everything was, because my hands had filed it. The share certificate, heavy paper gone soft at the corners, 20%, Geraldine Whitmore, 2001. The shareholder agreement, and the old board minutes from the garage years, typed by me, signed by me, under a title everyone, including me, had forgotten. Corporate Secretary. I sat on the guest bed reading my own typing from a quarter century ago, and I stopped feeling like a wronged wife. I started feeling like exactly what I was, the company's first officer and its second largest shareholder, holding evidence that the CEO was bleeding the till. A shareholder has rights. A 20% shareholder has rights with teeth. The right to request information, the right to put concerns before the board in writing, the right to be taken seriously by men who'd rather not. In the morning, I called Raymond Cutler. Raymond is 67, the board's lead independent director, a retired freight man with a handshake like a fence post. And 20 years ago, when he first invested, he told Lawrence in front of me that my books were the cleanest he'd seen in the state. I didn't tell Raymond the story. I didn't cry. And I didn't explain. Raymond, it's Jerry Whitmore. I'm not calling as his wife. I'm calling as a shareholder. I'm requesting a meeting, and I'd like the chair of the audit committee there. A silence went down the line, long enough that I could hear his porch wind chimes. Then Raymond said, slow and careful, I'll be there. And Gary, I always wondered why the numbers got noisy after you left. 3 days before my meeting with Raymond, a silver sedan pulled into my driveway, and Frances Sterling got out of it. I watched her through the kitchen window, checking her lipstick in the car glass, and I had time for one clean thought. She doesn't know that I know. Before the doorbell rang. Mrs. Whitmore? I'm from the office. Lawrence asked me to drop off the trust documents for your signature. Bold as brass. On my porch. In my earrings. I invited her in for tea, because a bookkeeper finishing an audit does not slam the ledger. She toured my living room with her eyes, pricing it. What a cozy home, she said, smaller than I pictured. On the side table sat my folder from the bank. New account papers, Dana's card clipped to the front. Her gaze was drifting toward it when I set the cookbook down on top, casual as a coaster, and asked if she took sugar. We had a lovely little chat, the fern waterer and the audience. She told me Lawrence worked too hard. I agreed. She told me the trust was really just housekeeping. I said housekeeping was my specialty. And at the door, unable to resist, she went off script. She looked at me the way young women look at old houses, and she said almost gently, "You had your years, Geraldine. These are mine." I held her gaze and handed back the unsigned folder. Then you should enjoy them, dear. Seasons are shorter than they look. From behind the curtain, I watched her sit in my driveway and take a photograph of my house through the windshield, appraising it. I wrote down the date and time under my grocery list. Paper doesn't cry, and paper doesn't lie. I told Emily everything on a Sunday, at her little apartment near the hospital, with the folder open on her coffee table, because my daughter is an adult and I was done letting anyone in my family make decisions for her by lying. She went through the pages the way nurses do, fast, exact, no flinching, until she reached the wedding venue invoice, and her hands went still. June 2027, she said. He was going to walk me down some aisle eventually, and he's already bought hers. Then the anger came up like weather, and she reached for her phone. I'm calling him. Right now. He doesn't get to sit at Christmas. Emily. I put my hand over the phone. If we shout, they'll call us hysterical. If we file, they'll call us right. She stared at me, breathing hard, my calm little girl who once reset a stranger's dislocated finger at a soccer game. Then she set the phone down. Then we file, Mom. She cried a while into my shoulder, and somewhere in it she laughed, wet and furious, and told me her own detail. Christmas before last, he forgot his wallet at that steakhouse, paid with the company card. He winked at me, like it was a family perk. I added it to the timeline that night. It fit snug between a Napa charge and a jeweler's invoice. My daughter asked me how I stayed so calm through all of this, and I told her the truth. Calm is what 28 years of keeping other people's books teaches you. Debits, credits, and patience. If a woman in your life taught you that kind of calm, tell her story in the comments, and subscribe, because you're going to want to see how mine ends. We're almost to the boardroom. On a gray Wednesday in Dana's conference room, the three of us, Dana, Marlene, and I, assembled the package, and I want to be precise about what it was, because precision is the whole point of me. 1. A formal shareholder letter, from Geraldine Whitmore, holder of 20%, addressed to the lead independent director and the audit committee chair of Whitmore Logistics. It laid out, in numbered paragraphs, an undisclosed relationship between the chief executive and a direct subordinate, the existence of Sterling Whitmore Holdings, LLC, and the deed it held. Wire records suggesting corporate funds had crossed into personal use through the client entertainment budget, and a company valuation in a drafted legal document that did not match any number the board had ever published. It demanded nothing but the one thing no honest board can refuse: an independent review. I'm not asking you to punish my marriage, the letter said. I'm asking you to read your own policy. 2. My divorce filing, complete, signed, sitting in Dana's drawer like a racehorse in the gate. 3. A short letter declining, in writing, to execute the family trust or the refinance. Marlene delivered the shareholder package to Raymond by hand. What happened next happened without me, which is exactly how it should work. The audit committee met that Friday. They pulled the company's own expense records. Their records, their systems, no stolen anything. And I'm told, the client entertainment codes matched my statements like a key, matching a lock. Monday morning, the board called a special meeting for Thursday. The stated agenda was restructuring review. Lawrence was told his big reorganization plan would finally get its hearing. He came home that night lighter than I'd seen him in a year, poured 2 glasses of wine, and toasted to new chapters. I touched my glass to his. One of us was right. That last week, Lawrence was magnificent. I say that honestly. It was like watching a man rehearse for an award. He practiced his restructuring pitch in the shower. He bought a new tie, told me Thursday was the biggest board day in company history, and let slip, in his confidence, more than he meant to. After Thursday, there'll be some changes. The company's getting a chief operating officer. He swirled his wine. And then some changes here at home too, Gary. Time we simplified things. Simplified. I looked at this man I had loved since I was 22, telling me across a pot roast that my demolition was scheduled, believing I couldn't read a forecast I had written. The audacity of it was almost beautiful. The way a tornado is almost beautiful from enough distance. Changes sound healthy, I said. He reminded me the trust papers were due Friday. Non-negotiable, sweetheart. The tax window. Then he asked, without a flicker, whether I'd iron his white shirt for Thursday, the French cuffs, the lucky one. So I ironed it. I stood in the laundry room where I had ironed that man's shirts for 28 years, and I did the collar the way he likes. And I thought about everything that shirt was going to witness. Call it sentiment. Call it one last service for old times' sake. Emily called it something spicier when I told her, and we laughed harder than we had in months. Thursday morning he left at 7, kissed my forehead, and said, "Wish me luck. Today's the day everything changes." He thought Thursday was his coronation. He was half right. Somebody in that building was about to be crowned. It just wasn't him, and it wasn't Francis Sterling. I dressed carefully. The navy suit I wore in 2001 to sign our first bank loan, back in fashion or close enough, and it still fit if I stood up straight, which I intended to do all day. No jewelry. The earrings were taken, and everything else felt like costume. The name, they could not take. The name would do. Into my mother's old briefcase went 7 bound folders, one for each director, tabbed and numbered the way I tab everything. The original share certificate wrote on top in a plastic sleeve, soft-cornered, 25 years old, still mine. Raymond had sent me the formal notice the night before. Special meeting, 10 o'clock, 12th floor. His text underneath the forwarded notice was pure Raymond. Come at 9:50. Wear comfortable shoes. Long meeting. At 9:45 I walked through the glass doors under the steel letters of my own last name, past the sign that still said authorized personnel only. Danny was at the desk. He recognized me, the lady from the mix-up, and started to rise, apology already forming, or maybe the same warning as before. Raymond stepped forward from beside the turnstiles. "She's with the board," he said, and the little gate swung open. I stopped for a moment in front of Danny, because I'd promised myself I would. He deserved gentleness. He was the only honest man in the lobby. "You told me you see his wife every day," I said. "After today you won't." We rode up 12 floors in a quiet elevator, Raymond and Marlene and I, watching the numbers climb. Through the glass wall of the boardroom I could see them all assembled. 7 directors, the general counsel, a screen glowing with the first slide of a restructuring plan that would never be presented. And at the head of the table, in the white shirt I had ironed, my husband, laughing at his own joke. The door opened. The laugh stopped halfway out of his mouth, and I watched it die there. Rooms full of powerful men go quiet in a particular way, not silence exactly, but a changing of channels. 7 directors turned. The general counsel straightened her legal pad. Lawrence stood up so fast his chair rolled back into the window. "Gary?" He tried a smile, found half of one. "Sweetheart, this is a closed session. This isn't a place for—" He caught the word before it left, but I collected it anyway. "For wives?" I said. "I agree completely. I'm not here as one. I'm here as the 20%. You could watch the sentence travel around the table. 2 of the younger directors, men hired into their seats long after the garage, looked at each other, plainly wondering who the woman in the navy suit was. Raymond settled that. He remained standing, opened the share registry, and read it out loud, name by name, like a man reading scripture. Geraldine Whitmore, 20%. Held since incorporation, 2001. Founding shareholder. And, he added, glancing up, this company's first corporate secretary. Some of you are sitting in a room she used to be. Frances Sterling arrived 30 seconds later, arms full of bound copies of a COO transition plan, and walked into all of that smiling. The smile lasted until she saw me. To her credit, she recovered fast. "This is a closed session," she said crisply from the doorway. "It is," Raymond agreed. "Mrs. Whitmore is here as a founding shareholder. Sit down, Mrs. Sterling." She sat. Lawrence was still standing, looking from Raymond to me, to the folders under my arm, doing arithmetic behind his eyes and not liking the totals. The general counsel clicked her pen. Raymond took his seat last, folded his hands and delivered the agenda in a voice like a gavel. "Item 1 is not restructuring. Item 1 is the audit." I passed the folders down the table myself, one to each director, the way I used to pass out board packets in a garage that smelled of diesel. Then I stood at the foot of the table, and I kept my voice at the register I use for reading recipes, because I had promised myself one thing above everything. They would get the facts, and he would get no fireworks to hide behind. Page 1. 18 months of automatic payments to the Brickstone Row Homeowners Association from an account bearing both our names. Page 2. The public deed. 14 Brickstone Row, held by Sterling Whitmore Holdings, LLC. Page 3. The state filing. 2 members. Their names, side by side. I heard the audit chair exhale through his nose. Page 4. The closing file. The $180,000 down payment, and the wire trail from the Capital Reserve. Page 5. Charges coded to client entertainment. A king suite in Scottsdale with an anniversary package, resort stays. A jeweler's bill for resetting diamond earrings that had left my jewelry box without me. Page 6. The drafted settlements company valuation, next to the figure from the board's own last annual statement, the 2 numbers refusing to look at each other. And page 7. The last page. The quiet one. The company's code of conduct, the section on undisclosed relationships with a direct subordinate, and the signature block where Lawrence Whitmore had certified his compliance every January for 5 straight years. "I'm not asking this board to punish my marriage," I said. "I'm asking you to read your own policy." Lawrence found his voice then, or a piece of it. "Gary, you don't understand." I looked at him for the first time since the door. "I understood this business when it fit in our garage, Lawrence. I kept its books before it could afford books." Down the table, the audit chair closed his folder softly. "The internal records match," he said to the room. "We pulled them Friday. Every code she cited. It all matches." The counsel asked Lawrence, formally, whether he wished to respond. And my husband, who had lied so beautifully for so long, chose this moment to finally be sincere. Sincerely loud. He slapped the table with an open hand. "I built this company." The water glasses jumped. "Every truck, every contract, every dollar in this room exists because of me." Nobody answered him, which made it worse. He wheeled on me next, voice climbing. "You did this out of spite. 28 years and this is who you are? You never supported this company. You sat at home while He heard himself say it in front of a table of people holding page 1, and stopped. Then he changed costumes. The rage folded, and out came the softer one, the one I'd have believed a year ago. Jerry, honey, 28 years. Whatever this looks like, we can talk at home. Don't do this to Emily. Our daughter, drawn like a shield over the wreckage he'd made of her inheritance. I said nothing at all, and my silence had more weight in that room than his fist. It was Frances who cracked first. I want it noted that I was misled, she announced, chin high, eyes wet on schedule. He told me the marriage was over years ago. Whatever the money was, that was his doing. I was manipulated too. Lawrence's head snapped toward her. Manipulated? The condo was... He bit down on it, 1 second too late. His idea. Frances finished for him, sweetly vicious now, self-preservation shedding the silk. The LLC, the wedding date, all of it. My name is on that deed because he insisted. They went at each other in front of 7 directors. Quietly at first. Then not. 2 people dividing blame like the last item in an estate. I sat down, folded my hands, and let them. At last I offered Frances one thing, very softly, since she'd once been generous enough to share her philosophy with a stranger at a gala. You told someone that some women get to enjoy him, I said. Enjoy this part too. Raymond stood. Both of you, outside, now. Through the frosted glass for the next hour I watched 2 blurred shapes in the hallway argue with their hands. Inside, the board did what boards do when the paper is clean and the council is watching. They followed procedure, and procedure, it turns out, has teeth when someone finally feeds it. By late afternoon it was done. Lawrence Whitmore was suspended immediately, pending termination for cause under his own employment agreement. Breach of fiduciary duty. Violation of the conduct policy he'd signed 5 Januaries running. For cause meant no severance package, no golden parachute, no consulting fee on the way down, and the council opened a claim to recover the misused funds, starting with a townhouse in German Village. The findings went to outside counsel for review, and I'll leave that where the lawyers left it. Frances Sterling was terminated the same day, undisclosed relationship, personal benefit from falsified expenses. Her transition plan to Chief Operating Officer was never opened. The folders sat on the credenza like programs from a cancelled show. The board named the senior operations chief as interim CEO, a steady woman who'd driven trucks for a living. And then Raymond, in front of everyone, asked whether I would accept a role as board observer, founding shareholder that I was. I told him the truth. I'll think about it. I have a divorce to finish first. A few of the directors actually laughed. The shocked, grateful laughter of men who'd been holding their breath since 10 o'clock. It took the board 4 hours to undo what took him 5 years to hide. On the way down, alone in the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the steel doors and fixed my collar. There was one conversation left, and it was waiting for me in the parking garage. He was standing by my car, tie loosened, the white shirt wilted. A man who had walked in that morning owning the building and would walk out owning a parking stub. Gary. His voice was sanded down to nothing. Please. We can still fix this quietly. Think about the house. Think about... I'm 55 years old. You're taking my whole life. Even now the accounting was backwards. His life, his company, his loss. 28 years. And I don't think it ever once occurred to him that he was standing in mine. He tried the apology then, and I listened to it the way Marlene reads a bad ledger, noting what was missing. It slid from sorry to circumstances to pressure to Frances pushed for things to, finally, you were never around after your mother. When it ran dry, I opened my purse. I handed him the small box I'd been carrying since spring, his wedding watch, rebuilt, polished, ticking. I had it repaired for our anniversary, I said. It keeps perfect time now. You should learn what that costs. He looked down at it, and there, one breath, I saw the man from the 2001 photograph, grease on his hands, laughing at something off camera. He almost said something true. Then the lawyer in him arrived. The eyes went calculating again, and the moment closed like a door. On top of the box, I laid a plain envelope. Dana had filed my petition at 9 that morning, an hour before the meeting. "You drafted yours first," I said. "Mine got filed first." I got in the car and pulled out, past the booth, past the sign about authorized personnel, and the guard had been right all along. He did see the wife every day. He just never saw the one who kept the receipts. The divorce settled out of court in the winter. When your husband's own drafted paperwork shows him lowballing the company and your accountant can trace every dissipated dollar, settlement talks move briskly. I kept the house in Dublin. The marital accounts were divided down the middle, and the money he'd poured into his second life came out of his half. Every documented cent of it. That's what dissipation means, and it meant nearly $400,000 worth of accountability. I kept my 20% of Whitmore Logistics, which turned out to be worth half again what his settlement draft had claimed, once the audit put an honest number on the company. And in the spring I said yes to Raymond. Board observer, founding shareholder, present every quarter at that same walnut table, in comfortable shoes. The company, I'm pleased to report, is thriving under the interim CEO they made permanent. A woman who answers questions plainly and files clean expense reports. The business runs better without its self-made man. The books say so. Lawrence rents a 2-bedroom apartment on the north side. The termination stood for cause, no severance, and a repayment schedule for the misused funds that his new consulting income, such as it is, services slowly. The townhouse at 14 Brickstone Row was sold to pay it down. Sterling Whitmore Holdings, LLC, was dissolved by the same state registry that had introduced us. The Ivy House, I'm told, has a strict no-refund policy on wedding deposits, so somewhere in a banquet office there's $12,500 resting in peace for a June that will never come. Frances left Columbus before the lease on her severance-free life ran out. I hear she's in client relations again, somewhere south, presumably with a new philosophy. Emily and I took the Alaska cruise the following June. The tickets changed over to her name easier than anything else in this story. We stood on the balcony in rented parkas and watched a glacier lose a piece of itself into the sea, loud as a door slamming, and my daughter raised her cocoa and said, "To simplifying things." As for me, my name is on every account I own. My key is the only key to my safe deposit box, and my file cabinet has a new drawer labeled with my lawyer's name, mostly empty, staying that way. Every quarter I walk into that glass lobby past the sign that says authorized personnel only, and I am authorized. Danny still works the desk. He stands a little straighter when I come through, and he says, "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore." Nobody laughs. Nobody corrects him. There is only one Mrs. Whitmore seen in that building now, and she signs her own name.